So,
All right.
to all of our attendees, I want to thank you so much for joining our webinar, Bulletproof Business, Insurance, and Business. We are here with Jason Lewis, who is going to grace us with his presence and his intellect on all things insurance today. One of the things that we found during the pandemic, Black businesses were not able to receive all of the funding that they should have been able to receive to ensure their success. And so as the New Orleans Regional Black Chamber of Commerce, we're trying to do everything we can to equip you all so that moving forward, should any type of large issue that impacted the world occur again, that you all are prepared and that our businesses can survive and thrive. And that is the goal of our chamber. So like I said earlier, I am Jessica Jackson. I am the new membership director. And the mission of the New Orleans Regional Black Chamber of Commerce has always been to serve as an advocate as well as a resource for our Black-owned businesses, our Black entrepreneurs, and advocate for you all and just provide you with all of the resources that you need to be successful and thrive and scale your businesses. And so this year, we actually are celebrating 15 years of being in operation and doing just that. And if you are not currently a member, we would love to have the opportunity to speak with you about why you should join the chamber and all of the amazing membership benefits that we have. And so we will touch on that more at the end of this webinar. But for now, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Jason Lewis. He will be talking to us about commercial property coverage, umbrella coverage, general liability, and a term that is new to me, which is business interruption coverage. So I just want to remind you all that we do have our chat box. So if you have any questions at any point during this webinar, please be sure to utilize that so that way we can address any questions or comments that you have. We want to touch everything today, and I will pass it over to Mr. Lewis.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who joined today's webinar. Whether you're a business owner or just an individual who's curious about learning some more information, everyone gets a gold star for signing up and logging in to listen to someone talk about insurance. It's not the sexiest industry in the world, but it touches every business that you can imagine. And the more you understand about insurance and the role it plays in your overall business plan, the better off you'll be. You'll be able to have better conversations with your insurance agent. So I very much appreciate everyone who has signed up and logged on to join us today. As mentioned earlier, my name is Jason Lewis. I am the president of Noah W. Lewis and Associates, an independent insurance agency here in New Orleans. My father started the business about 20 or so years ago. I've been with the business for 10 years. My life before that was in finance. I have worked in investment banking as well as private equity, but decided to go into the family business and see if I could help other small and emerging businesses to secure their livelihood by offering them good advice and insurance products to make sure that their businesses and their well-beings are protected. As mentioned, today we're just going to go over some really general, high-level topics related to insuring a business. Now, I'm not sure if any of you heard some of our pre-conversation before the webinar went live, but we were talking about how a business is effectively a mechanism for managing risk. And those individuals that can manage risk well are typically rewarded with successful businesses. So when you think about it, when you put together a business plan, you are anticipating that you are going to spend some amount of money. These are your expenses. If you're a baker, you have to buy all of your supplies, put them together, and hopefully you can sell donuts or cakes for more than the cost of your supplies. If you're a consultant, you may not have to buy supplies, but you may have to travel around to different clients, and you may have to invest in yourself, paying for classes and different workshops so you can amass the knowledge needed to be an effective consultant. You take on those costs, and the hope is at some point you can charge clients for your expertise, and that income is more than the cost that you put out. All those activities are essentially risk management activities. You have to make certain decisions that you hope will pan out in some sort of positive way. Well, insurance is a big part of that mix. Insurance should be one of the cornerstones of most businesses' overall business plan, but definitely their risk management plan. So today we're going to go through a number of different types of insurance. And if you look on your screen now, on the left side of the screen, there is a list of different lines of coverage, is what we call them. And these are all lines of coverage that relate to insuring a business. Now, they're organized in this way from top to bottom because I wanted to demonstrate which policies are most necessary and which policies are good for a business to have, but won't necessarily prevent a business from operating. And that'll make a little more sense as we kind of go through the different coverages. Now, if you're a small business, or if you're a contractor, or if you're any type of business that tries to engage with large clients or otherwise work with other large businesses, you've probably faced a situation where either that client or that partner asked for your proof of coverage or stated that they require a certain amount of insurance before they engage you in a contract. That's the premise I'd like to start from. Typically, when you engage some entity in a contract and they're asking for your insurance, the first thing they want to see is your general liability coverage. And so that's why that's top of the list. Every business should have general liability coverage, regardless. But if you don't have it, it will be a big hurdle and a hindrance to you gaining high quality customers or engaging in meaningful contracts, because it's often a requirement for most contracts. So what is general liability? As the name implies, it's a pretty broad coverage that protects your business from various liability claims. What's a liability claim? A liability claim is if your business is found legally responsible for damage or injury to a person or to property. So let's say you have a lawn care business and one of your employees is doing their thing. They're on a riding lawnmower, they're cutting some grass. That lawnmower picks up a rock and that rock is tossed into a building's window. That broken window is the direct result of your employee, which means that your business is liable for that damage. That's the type of claim that a general liability policy would address. Often these policies are set up with specific limits, and those limits are broken into two pieces. There's a per occurrence limit, which means anytime something happens, any one incident, that's the most that could be paid out for that one incident. And then there's what's called the aggregate limit. The aggregate limit is the most that will be paid out during the entire life of the policy, which is typically 1 year. When contracts require this type of coverage, they often require a minimum of 1 million per occurrence and 2 million aggregate. That means the insurance company will pay up to 1 million for any single incident and up to 2 million for all incidents that take place during the life of that policy. Again, typically 1 year long. Now, general liability has its limits. One thing that a general liability policy will not cover is if your employee is injured. So let's take that same landscaping company. One of your employees is rolling along on the lawnmower, it picks up a rock, it throws it out, but this time the rock hits another one of your employees and injures that individual. That's not a general liability claim. That's the next one on our list, workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is essentially the sole remedy for an employee who is injured while engaged on the job. And workers' compensation is also one of those lines of coverage that's required in almost any contract that you engage in. Not having a workers' compensation policy will prevent you from securing many of the larger contracts that might allow your business to grow in a meaningful way. Workers' compensation can be a little bit tricky when we're talking about very small businesses and sole proprietorships. I have a lot of clients who are, 1 or 2 person shops, and they try to get a contract and they're prevented from doing so because they don't carry workers' compensation, because they feel that their business is just too small to do so. That's not the case. Even sole proprietors can have a form of workers' compensation. And doing so both protects your business and it protects your employees. It's a key type of coverage to have. And it's something that you should definitely speak to your insurance agent about if you don't have the coverage or you have any questions about it. Like general liability, workers' compensation is set with specific limits. These limits are broken out into injury per physical injury, and then injury per employee by disease, and then an aggregate injury by disease. And I'd like to take a quick pause and just talk about that disease piece. So something like asbestos, I'm sure you all see these commercials with these lawyers saying, have you been exposed to asbestos? Give us a call. The type of ailment that may come from working with a noxious or toxic material, that could in fact be covered under a workers' compensation policy. COVID-19 would not. And the reason being is that that's called a communicable disease, which an employer really has very limited ability to control. So something like a pandemic would be excluded by workers' comp. But something specific to that line of work, like exposure to an asbestos-based material, would be covered under workers' compensation. I'll pause here for a quick second. We'll see if we have any questions. I did have one question that came in that asked about what would be a general liability claim. There are lots of different claim examples for general liability. It's often considered slip and fall coverage. If you have a retail store or shop and someone comes in and either the carpet isn't stapled down tightly and they trip over carpet, or the floor was recently waxed and there isn't proper signage and they slip and fall on the waxed floor. Any of these things would be general liability type of claims. As we mentioned before, the broken window scenario, if a lawnmower kicks up a rock and breaks the glass of a building or of a vehicle, that would be a general liability claim. So it's a very broad type of coverage that's designed to cover fairly non-specific types of injuries that are just incidental to the type of work that you might be engaged in. If you have a bakery and you mistakenly leave a hot pan fresh out of the oven on the counter where a customer can touch it by mistake and they burn themselves, general liability. It's those type of relatively non-specific injuries that it would cover. All right, I'm keeping an eye open for any additional questions, but if there aren't any right now, I'll move on to commercial auto.
Do you all have any other questions for Jason before we move on to the next insurance topic? Okay, all right, Jason, you go ahead. And don't forget to utilize the chat function.
And by all means, chat me with questions, ask me to pause, ask me to revisit a topic or go into more detail. I talk about and think about insurance all day, so I can rattle on pretty good. Commercial auto insurance is another type of coverage that most contracts will require. And surprisingly enough, this may apply to you even if your business does not own its own vehicles. So, commercial auto insurance is fairly self-explanatory. It's vehicle insurance for any cars or trucks that your business may own. Now, if you are vehicle owners and you live anywhere near New Orleans, you know the rates for auto insurance are pretty high. And commercial auto insurance, unfortunately, is no different. But it's very important to have a commercial auto policy. One, is legally mandated. But two, it protects the assets of your business in the event that an accident happens and your business is found liable or at fault for that accident. It's imperative to have this type of coverage. Now, if your business does not own its own vehicles, there's still a policy that you should seriously consider for your business. This is called a hired and non-owned auto policy. Hired and non-owned auto. What that means is that if your business either uses an auto that it does not own, or it rents a vehicle, or if you personally use your own vehicle for business purposes, this policy will protect your business if you or an employee causes an accident in their own vehicle, but while on company business. For instance, you've got an office, you ask one of your employees, hey, can you go run this deposit to the bank? And they take the material, they head out the door. On the way to the bank, they cause an accident. And were it not for them running that errand on the business's behalf, they wouldn't have been there. If that's the case, the other party in the accident has the right to draw your business into that suit because it was a business errand that caused that employee to be there, even though they were in their own car. that would be a non-owned auto claim. And without a hired and non-owned auto policy, your business would be exposed. So that's something to think about. Professional liability. Professional liability is required for some contracts, but less frequently. And it often depends on the type of work that's being done or the type of industry that your business works in. Now, unlike general liability, professional liability covers specific activities that are directly related to your specific type of work, and really your expertise in that type of work. So let's talk about our lawn care experts, and juxtapose a general liability claim versus a professional liability claim. We talked about the lawnmower example. You're driving your lawnmower, you pick up a rock, you break a window, the general liability. However, let's say that in addition to just lawn care, you do arbory work, you trim trees. You have this oak tree that you've been hired to trim back, and it turns out that you trim the branches too deeply or too aggressively, and after 2 or 3 months, the tree begins to die. That tree has some value to whoever hired you to trim it, and they decide to bring up a claim where they want you to reimburse them for the cost of fully removing and replacing that tree. The injury to that tree is a professional liability claim. As a certified arborist or tree trimmer, you are supposed to have the expertise necessary to safely and effectively trim back that tree in a manner that is not going to cause injury to it or damage to any neighboring property. If your work, a direct result of your work, has damaged that tree, then you haven't lived up to that level of expertise. And so that would fall under the professional liability spectrum. So that's the main way that general liability and professional liability differ. While general liability covers broad, basic, incidental type of issues that your business may be involved in, professional liability really focuses on those things that your business has claimed to have a core competency in. And should you misstep or mess up in that specified area of expertise, professional liability would come into play. I think we might have had one question. This is related to commercial auto. They're asking if an employee were in a company vehicle, would this be covered under commercial auto? Yes. An employee driving a company car owned by the company would be covered under the commercial auto policy. Now, let me be a little more specific. The business would be covered under the policy. However, and you all see all the commercials we have for lawyers, Louisiana is a very litigious state. The employee could possibly be sued individually for their negligence or careless acts while driving the company car. So, I'm the owner of ABC Company. My employee, Jane, is driving. Jane is at fault for an accident. If my company is sued because the side of the car says ABC Company on it, Morris Sport decides to give me a call and sue me, that commercial auto policy will step in front of my business and say, we are protecting this business from this suit. However, if Jane, as my employee, is sued individually, it would actually be her personal auto coverage that would have to protect her as the driver. But the commercial auto protects me and my business. I hope that makes sense. And of course,
That does make sense. That makes perfect sense.
keep those questions coming in the chat. This is to make sure everybody comes away with feeling a little bit smarter and clearer on the coverages they have or the coverages they may want to look into securing. Umbrella coverage. So umbrella coverage is as the name suggests. It is a type of policy that actually sits above multiple different policies. And it provides additional levels of protection above and beyond the insurance policies that it sits above. So for instance, let's say that you have a general liability policy with a $1 million limit, a commercial auto policy, $1 million limit, professional liability policy, $1 million limit. But you feel like your business is growing. You're going to have more clients. You're going to be doing more business, which means you're going to have more exposure. And as a result, you want more protection. If you purchase an umbrella limit, you can get limits much higher than $1 million that will sit over all of your other policies. So let's say we have a general liability claim, and the worst thing in the world happens. I'm picking on my lawn care example here, but that lawnmower picks up a rock, and that rock is thrown, and it hits a 5-year-old in the eye, it blinds them. So you've blinded a child. The amount of damage that can be sought in an instance like that can be as much as the lawyer's imagination. So it's possible that your $1 million general liability policy may not be enough to cover the full claim. What if the judge awards a $2 million settlement to that injured child? With the general liability policy, you would still be on the hook for an additional $1 million after your policy has reached its limit. That's where an umbrella policy comes in. In the instance that a claim completely exhausts the limit of the underlying policy, the umbrella policy will step in and provide additional limits of however much you're willing to secure. Umbrellas are typically in blocks of $1 million. So you can get a 1 million, a 2 million, a 3 million, a 4 million, a $5 million limit. And they can also, depending on the size of your organization and your need, be stacked on one another. One of my clients has 3 separate $10 million excess or umbrella policies. So if their initial $3 million general liability policy is completely exhausted, they've got another 10 million on top of that. If they get sued for $20 million, they've got another 10 million on top of that, and then another on top of that. So depending on the type of work you're in, it may make sense to increase the amount of coverage you have, and umbrella policies are an effective way to do exactly that. Also, we touched on that general liability example, but the same is true for the commercial auto. If you've got an umbrella policy that sits above your commercial auto, in that same scenario, a child is injured severely, and the settlement is in the multi-million dollars. If your commercial auto policy is completely exhausted, that umbrella will kick in and provide additional coverage in the face of very, very large claim settlements. This isn't something small businesses think a lot about. And I wouldn't urge every business out there to consider or purchase an umbrella policy. But if you can afford it, and if you have really taken a hard look at the various risks your business might face, it definitely makes sense to consider it, or at minimum have a conversation with your agent about how an umbrella policy might fit into your overall risk management program. I'm just going to pause for 1 second, do a time check. We're good on time. Again, keep your questions coming.
Are there any questions for Jason regarding the umbrella coverage? I actually have a question for you, Jason. Are there
Sure.
particular industries or contracts that you would recommend particular business owners have this type of coverage?
Well, yes and no. I mean, some industries are going to be inherently exposed to the potential for higher claims. For instance, that client that I mentioned with the multiple layers of umbrella and excess policies, that's a hospital, right? So you're talking about healthcare industry, doctors who may be at risk of various malpractice types of claims or injury to their patients. They should definitely have umbrella coverage. Transportation companies, if you've got a bus full of children, that's a ton of potential claims, and each of those claims could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It would behoove someone in that type of industry to have high levels of coverage, and an umbrella policy could provide that. And so it's both business specific and it can be industry specific. Construction companies, some of the largest construction companies are actually self-insured, which means that they're to the size that they can just put a pool of money to the side. So if anything happens, they can pay out of that pool of money. But before you get to that scale, construction companies can cause a lot of damage. You bring down a building, you damage streets and things like that. There could be a lot of liability there. So it makes sense to look at umbrella coverage options for those types of businesses. So yeah, there's not one particular industry that needs to look at it, nor any particular business in that industry. It's really an evaluation of your own business and the type of clients you engage with and the type of activities your business does. And again, talk it over with your agent. Your agent is supposed to be an advisor and someone who can help guide you through these decisions and see if an umbrella policy is appropriate for your business.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're down to crime and fidelity coverage. Sometimes a contract might require you to have a crime policy or a fidelity policy or a fidelity bond. Like the name implies, these products are related to coverage against different type of crimes, specifically those related to money and monetary instruments. For instance, many janitorial firms, when they engage in a contract, often those contracts require that janitorial firm to have either a fidelity bond or a crime policy. And what these coverages do is, should an employee of that organization have sticky fingers, and they take property or take money or take securities from a client's premises, um, that client can file a claim or draw down against the fidelity bond that the janitorial company has. Now, crime and fidelity bonds, or crime policies, excuse me, or fidelity bonds, are not exclusive to things like janitorial firms. Accounting firms would have to have this type of coverage. Even retail stores, when it comes to the behavior of their own employees, would want to have this type of coverage. And most businesses that are high cash businesses would want to have this type of coverage. Unlike most policies where the policy is designed to protect, well, let me rephrase this. Most policies are outward looking. They are looking at third parties in case an injury is done to a third party, and that third party seeks compensation from your business. Your business is protected from the severe financial consequences of that third party seeking to be indemnified for their injury. A crime policy can actually be to the benefit of the company itself. So if you have a crime policy in place and it turns out that one of your employees has engaged in some manner of fraud and has transferred funds from your business to some unauthorized account, and you or some representative of your business catches wind of that, this is one of those instances where you can file a claim against that crime policy, and your own business would be indemnified for the acts of that employee. So that's one way that a crime policy is a little bit different than some of the other policies. Again, depending on the type of work you do, and depending on the type of contracts you seek to engage in, you may see a requirement for a crime policy or a fidelity bond. And I don't know if it's an accurate definition, but when I look at the word fidelity, I essentially think trustworthiness with money. That's what these are all about. So if you're engaging into a contract where you will have access to a client's facilities, especially if that access is going to be unsupervised, if you're going to be doing some sort of painting work or something in a building that hasn't been fully cleared out, it wouldn't be surprising if that contract has a clause requiring a fidelity bond or crime coverage. Okay, so we're all here in Southern Louisiana. We all are familiar with property insurance and the need for it. We know that we're in a somewhat flood-prone region, that we are in a high hurricane and high wind region. So one thing most people in our area do have an appreciation for is property coverage. That's true on the personal side, and of course, it's true on the business or commercial side as well. So, commercial property coverage should definitely be a component of any business's overall insurance program or risk management program. Commercial property coverage is not all that different than home insurance or homeowners coverage. One main difference is that home insurance tends to be a package of different types of coverage all rolled into one. Um, there's coverage for the home itself, the building. There's coverage for the stuff inside the house. There's a little bit of liability coverage for if someone comes to your house and is injured while at the house. Um, Commercial property coverage uh, pulls that all apart. Each piece is uh, individually priced and essentially carries its own policy. When we talk about commercial property, we're typically talking about physical buildings. Um, so we're talking about the actual structure itself, as opposed to what's called business personal property, which is the property that may be within a building. It's anything that's owned by a business, but it's movable. It's desks, chairs, appliances, computers, things like that. So commercial property coverage tends to talk about the building itself, whereas business personal property is focused on the contents of a building or the movable property of a company. Now, just like home insurance, commercial property insurance will be driven largely by the characteristics of the building being insured, what the building is made of. Is it a frame building? Is it a brick building? Is it cinder block? Um, is it a huge steel structure with a concrete exterior? All those factors will play into what rate the insurance company issues for that property. Um, the actual location will also have an impact. Um, how close to the coast is it? How far inland is it? What's the elevation of it? All these different elements will play a role. And the various factors that affect the commercial property piece related to the actual building itself, they also pertain to the business personal property, the things in the building. So if you have a huge concrete building that's built like a fortress, everything in that building is going to be more protected than a small aluminum shed. So the rate for your business personal property is also dictated by the rate for the commercial property itself. Now, not everybody has their own building, but most businesses do have stuff. Even home-based businesses may have a computer that's dedicated to the business or a room in the house where everything in there is specific to the business. Even in those instances, it is definitely worth looking into securing a business personal property policy because most homeowners policies do have exclusions for business related property, or they have what's called sublimits, which means that they'll only cover that property up to a certain amount, maybe $5,000, maybe $10,000. But knowing your business's assets and being able to have those assets protected in the event of a fire, storm, or anything like that. It's critical and it's crucial. Now, the property coverage closely relates to the next item, business interruption. And I'll touch on that in one moment, but I do want to see if there was a question that came in.
Yes, Jason, the question that just came in is, if you operate your business from home, should you also have commercial property coverage, or would home property coverage cover you in this area?
Yes, and that's an excellent question. It depends on how much property your business owns. As I just touched on a little bit, most home insurance policies will either exclude business related property altogether, meaning that they don't provide any coverage, or they will have what's called a sublimit. And that sublimit is exactly as it sounds. It will limit the amount of coverage afforded for any business related items that are located at your home. And that sublimit may be $5,000, it may be $10,000. And depending on the type of business you have, that may be sufficient. But if you've got, for instance, a home-based printing business, and you've got, $5,000 worth of paper and supplies, and you've got a $15,000 fancy copying and printing machine or something like that, your home insurance policy isn't going to cover that stuff. You definitely need to look into a business personal property policy for your business items, even though they're located at your home. So in short, it depends, but lean towards seeking separate coverage for that business related stuff. All
That
right.
makes sense. Thank you for that, Jason.
You're very welcome. All right, I do want to leave a couple of quick minutes at the end, so I'll move through the last two quickly. Business interruption. This became a big question during COVID and during the pandemic. People were forced to shutter their businesses, essentially through no fault of their own. Would this be something that business interruption would address? Well, first, business interruption is a type of coverage that essentially protects the income of a business in the event that something happens that forces the business to not be able to operate for some period of time. A classic example is a fire. You've got a retail store, a fire happens, your business is shuttered while the place is repaired as a result of the fire, while you restock your inventory and things like that. A business interruption policy will essentially, for the period of time that the business cannot operate as a result of that damage, and during the time repairs are being made, the business interruption policy will essentially provide your business with the income it would have generated if none of that damage had occurred. So it's essentially insurance for the income of the business. Now, many people asked about COVID and the mandatory shutdowns and whether or not these are things that would trigger business interruption. No, these things didn't trigger business interruption. One, there's an exclusion on most, if not all, insurance policies that exclude communicable diseases. COVID-19 was a communicable disease, and thus, insurance policies just aren't designed to address that type of risk. But two, business interruption is triggered by the same types of events that trigger property coverage. Meaning, if you don't have property that is damaged by some covered, what they call peril, some covered incident, fire, hurricane, a car driving into your building or something like that. If you don't have property that was damaged in that manner, then business interruption won't be triggered. Essentially, their viewpoint is, we are going to replace your income while your damaged property or damaged location is being fixed or repaired. But if you have no property and there's nothing to damage, then they feel that there is no claim to be made. I have this conversation with consultants all the time. Consultants may not have any meaningful amount of property because their service, their product is their expertise. Well, in the eye of an insurance company, if your business isn't location dependent, if you don't have property that, if damaged, will hinder or prevent you from being able to do business, then you're not in a position where business interruption would apply, because you can just pick up and move and your expertise moves with you and you can continue to conduct business. So that's why business interruption is tied essentially to property coverage. But it is a separate type of coverage that you'd have to purchase on its own. Last and really quickly, I'll touch on cyber insurance. Everybody should get cyber insurance. It doesn't necessarily do what you think it might all the time. Meaning, if someone holds your business hostage and you've got ransomware on your computer and they lock your computer and say, you got to pay us 50,000 Bitcoin or whatever to unlock your computer. Some cyber insurance policies will do that, but most will not. What cyber insurance really does, it protects you from the liability of your sharing third parties' information in an improper way. So what does that mean? If you've got a business and you're able to take payments online, and as a result, you've got a number of your customers' billing information in your files. Well, if some hacker gets to your computer and they're able to get to your customers' files, if those customers are damaged as a result of that, and they can point directly to your system being where the bad actors got their information from, that's a liability claim, because you didn't effectively maintain the privacy and security of your customers' information. And if they file a claim as a result of that, that's one area where cyber will come into play. Also, if you have a website and you are making various statements on your website or making claims about your business or anything like that, and it turns out you do something that's either copywritten and you violate someone's copyright, or someone feels that you libel them, or you have disparaged a competitor in some way and they bring suit because of that, all that different type of electronic communication and privacy, cyber insurance addresses those types of incidents as well. Right now, it's still relatively inexpensive. I advise everyone to look into a cyber policy because the entire world is moving online. It's very difficult to avoid it. Even if you're in a physical business like something like lawn care or construction, you still need a virtual presence just to be able to effectively reach customers these days. And if you're online in any way, you have some sort of cyber exposure. So it's very worthwhile looking into a cyber liability coverage. I'm checking the time here. Time flies when you're talking insurance, I know. But we do have a few minutes left. Those chat lines are still open if anybody has any questions. I'd love to field them while we still have a few minutes.
So I have a quick question for you regarding the cyber insurance. Is that something that you've seen an increased demand for over the past year? As we were already in a virtual world, but everyone had to pretty much pivot that way during the pandemic.
Interestingly enough, I haven't seen as much of an uptick as I would have expected. Because exactly like you said, we're all online, we're all doing these Zooms. People have their storefronts online. That's how they are connecting with customers and selling their product. But I think it's a new type of coverage. I think people aren't as aware that it even exists. They may think that it's something that only real giant companies purchase, big banks and things like that. But if you have a website, or even if you have an email address, you are in a position where you could benefit from having cyber insurance. And the thing about cyber is, the cost to bad actors is so low. By that I mean, a hacker can rob you without leaving their bedroom. There was a time when if you wanted to rob someone, you had to get dressed. you had to go outside. You had to put on a mask. You had to do all these things. But the cost of this type of crime is so low that it makes sense for everyone to protect themselves with this type of coverage if they can.
So I also wanted to ask you if you could tell us what are some key things that you've seen your clients do really well, either prior to coming to you or rather with your advice, and then what are some mistakes that you've seen businesses make, and by the time they get to you, you're trying to do major damage repair?
So, and that's an excellent question. Thanks so much. One of the things that I think really benefits clients is just accepting the insurance as part of the cost of doing business. I have a few clients who early on in the lives of their business, they make insurance a priority. They make it a priority. They purchase the types of coverages that they need, and they make sure they have the appropriate limits on those policies for their business. Now, this can be difficult when you're early on and you're not bringing in a lot of money, because insurance, if everything goes well, the money you spend on insurance is just out the door, right? You don't get anything back, because if everything goes well, you never have to rely on your insurance. But when things don't go well, it has to be there, right? Now, those clients who make it a priority and put everything in order and everything in place on the front end, what I've seen is that they grow a lot quicker, right? Because when they engage it with a client or they try to secure a contract, when the person on the other side of the table sees they have all their insurance lined up and it's accurate and it's correct and it's paid for, it makes their business look much more legitimate. It looks more established. The business owner looks more serious about their business. And that really aids in growth because it removes some of the hurdles that a lot of small businesses and young businesses run into, which is, not having the appropriate coverage. The same is true on the flip side. One of the mistakes that I often see businesses make is, I'll get around to the insurance when I can. And I understand, right? I mean, cash is a limited resource. And so you have to make the best decisions you can with the money you have. But this is particularly prevalent with contractors. They'll either not get any insurance or only get general liability. And then the opportunity for some large attractive contract comes up. right? Now they've been in business for however long. This opportunity comes up, and that opportunity requires certain types of coverage. And now they're hustling. They're trying to find the coverage. They're trying to pull all their documents together that they really haven't been keeping track of, because why would they? They didn't have it. And because of the time constraint and the lack of familiarity with the type of information they need to have at hand to get properly written, they miss those opportunities. And what happens is it repeats itself. They miss the opportunity, and then they say, well, this was a waste. I'm not going to spend money on insurance now. And the next opportunity comes, and they find themselves in the same position. And so, yeah.
I'm glad you touched on that. So one thing I wanted to say to our members really quickly is that our staff at NORBCC, we are really staying on top of procurement opportunities with you all, whether it be at the state level, city level, surrounding parishes, whatever. We're really staying on top of these things for you all. So our members that do have an interest in applying for these RFPs, RFQs, invitation to bids, whatever it may be as these come out, please take a look at these listings as we send them to you all, and look at what the requirements are. If you're not able to apply for a particular advertisement as we send it to you, go ahead and start preparing yourself, because we want to equip you all so that way you can be ready for these types of opportunities, just as Jason said, so you're not scrambling. So just take a look at that. We recently sent one out. I believe it was from DOTD Auto Aviation. I'll have to go back and look at my email. But this is a good opportunity to make yourself aware of the types of insurance that are necessary, so you're not missing out on these opportunities. So I just wanted to say that as Jason just mentioned it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will reiterate, I know that we're all not made of money. You have to manage your resources as best you can. Again, taking a look at this list of coverages on the left, I would say, the top 4 are paramount, like just to get out the door. But most businesses should seek to ultimately have all of these if they want to be fully protected, and treat their business as a going concern, and not just a hobby.
Are there any questions for Jason? Any comments, any experiences that any of our members have had with business insurance that you'd like to share? Okay, well, if not, Jason, we thank you so much for your time. You gave us a lot of great information today. I want to give you the opportunity to let everyone know of how they can reach you should they have a need for your services.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate you inviting me today. I enjoyed it. Again, I know it was a lot of information, so by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to our office if you have any questions or would like to follow up on anything. Again, my name is Noah Jason Lewis. My phone number is here on the screen. It's 504-754-1138. Or you can reach me at my email address, which is Jason, Jason, at nwlins.com. That's nwlins.com.
Thank you, Jason. And I want to take a moment to thank everyone that attended our webinar today. I just want to remind you all that we do have an upcoming webinar, and the topic is Equity 101. As Black businesses, we have not always had the access to capital that we should have. However, at this moment in time, a lot of larger corporations as well as financial institutions have taken notice of the value in investing into Black businesses. And so to ensure that you all have access to that capital and are able to secure it, we are hosting a webinar this Thursday evening at 5:30 p.m. So that way you all can find out what these investors are looking for when that time comes for you to speak with them about investing in your business. And again, that's this Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Register with us. And I also just wanted to offer you all, if you are not a member, the opportunity to join the chamber. Some of our member benefits are being listed on our website in our membership directory. We actually just had a member reach out to us yesterday in search of a Black-owned marketing or PR firm, and I was able to send him our membership directory. And we also have some new exciting things coming up. If you'd like more information on that, please give us a call at 504-948-0991. All right.
All right. Well, thanks again, Jessica. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. We appreciate you, Jason.
All righty. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.